Greetings, YouTube. As everyone on the planet, more or less, is aware, BP, British Petroleum, recently had a severe oil drill rig accident where 11 people's lives were lost. And, unfortunately, it has led to the worst ecologic disaster in the Gulf Coast history, quite possibly in the entire history of the United States. And it's looking like it may end up being a world-class event, because the oil leak is still pumping tens of thousands of barrels of oil into the Gulf Coast every day. Now, you can well imagine I am questioning the government's complicity in this whole process, BP's safety record, and everybody involved who had anything to do with BP money. But recently I saw a report that said that BP had 760 safety violations filed against it. Now that sounds like a very large number, and it is. But taken out of context, you might be wondering, how does that compare to other oil producers? Well, in the same time frame that those 760 safety violations happened in, Exxon had 8. 8. And Exxon is the company that had the last worst ecological disaster in U.S. history as far as oil is concerned. So they at least learned something from that mistake, it seems. BP, however, seems to have learned nothing at all. Now, since they actually were 760 safety violations registered, that means they are in fact being inspected. So, we have inspectors. There appear to be regulations that are being broken, so it means we have regulations in place. It seems that we have a problem with oversight and enforcement. A big problem. And one of the problems we have in the US is that quite a few of the people that are involved in overseeing the petroleum industry have ties that are just a little too tight to the petroleum industry itself. So, I think that we need to take steps to avoid this. And one step we can do is make sure that no one hired to oversee the whatever organization they're being hired to oversee has worked for that organization in the past. And make sure that they will never work for that organization for a time after they have left the job, say 5 years. So if you're in charge of regulating the petroleum industry and you quit or you're fired, whatever have you, you cannot be hired by them for 5 years. We need to get the incentive out of the process for people to bring what knowledge they have acquired on the job, which lets them collude while in government, or while in government and lets them use that in the favor of the industry that they're used to regulate. Another thing we can do is increase fines. Now, I'm not just talking about saying, okay, we'll go from 10,000 to 100,000. That kind of thing, in my opinion, doesn't work. Flat fines are a dead end. I think fines should be related directly to gross profits. I think that you should have 2 levels of fines, minor and major. And if a minor fine is brought against a company, 0.1% of their gross profits for the year are taken away from them, which means 760 fines would have resulted in a 76% loss of gross profits, which would have been a really severe incentive to not break the law. And if it's a major fine, a major issue, you take a full single percent away from them. In this case, those 11 deaths, I would count each of them as a major fine, a major flaw, which would be 11% of their gross profit. Now, we can't do anything against BP now about this. Whatever piddly level of fines they've paid in the past is going to be nothing compared to what they pay in the future. And there is a percentage chance out there that BP may end up ceasing to exist as a company because of this disaster. Who knows? They may be able to pull a rabbit out of the hat. But we need to link it as a percentage, because we need to make sure that the bigger a company gets, the more they're going to pay attention to the fines. Because the bigger a company gets, the more they have to lose. But if you use a flat fine, and if Joe's Petroleum Company and BP commit the same act, and you have a flat fee, it's more of a damaging fee against Joe's Petroleum than it is against BP. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be a percentage of the profits, the gross profits, so that it's a very much profit-driven decision to make sure that all the safety rules are followed. You make it so that shaving safety is too expensive to do. You make it so this, make it sure that making every single safety code gets followed, you're going to make sure it happens. And that's what we need to do. Another thing we need to do is what Canada has done. Now, Canada has offshore drilling, deep water, like they do here in the Gulf. And when a company drills a deep water pipeline in Canada, they're required to drill two. The main one used for the drilling and the pumping, and a relief well. So that in the event there's a problem with the main one, you just switch over to the relief well, and you're good to go. Yes, there's a spill, but it's a controlled spill. You are immediately going to be able to switch over to the backup plan because it's already in place. Now, the petroleum industry is fighting this in Canada. They want to eliminate it. They don't want the Canadians to have this policy in place. And they are fighting here in the U.S. to make sure that such a policy never gets put into place. And they are dumping millions of dollars into both countries in an effort to make sure that this doesn't happen. Of course, Canadians would be insane if they were to let this policy be eliminated, and we in America would be equally insane if we did not immediately vote it into power. Because the Gulf Coast has shown us, if there isn't a safety process already in place, that it's going to take months to get one put into place. And you can't afford that. The ecologic disaster, the economic disaster going on in the Gulf is going to adversely affect the Gulf Coast for probably 100 years. And it is going to wipe out some 20,000 jobs in Louisiana alone because we are going to have a 6-month moratorium on drilling. Now, the government said they may back off on that once they can prove that they can do it safely. But even then, it's going to cost thousands of jobs. So BP needs to be held accountable for this, and we need to get policies put in place to make sure that this kind of thing can never happen again. And if something does, someone breaks a safety violation, we need to make sure that fines are a percentage of their gross profits, not some piddly-ass flat fee.